Welcome to the Amy Plus podcast. Today, I'm back with part 2 featuring my husband, Joe, after a wild first episode where he broke up psych ward fights and hustled through some pretty crazy jobs in his teens and 20s. But now we're diving into his next chapter, the tech world chaos. From getting fired 4 times to selling auto parts in the backwoods of Kentucky to flying across the country for a job he didn't even apply for, Joe went on to work at CA, a multi-billion-dollar software giant, and then Mercury, which sold for $4.5 billion. Casual, right? Buckle up. Part 2 is a ride. Is that interesting hearing that out loud, the numbers?
Yeah. Always is. Billions are good.
With a B.
With a B.
You always say that, with a B. Well, as you know, you're going to get used to this. I want to welcome you into your own home.
Yep. Good to be here.
We should say that every time. Good to be here. Joe, what's your look today?
Ralph Lauren and Hermes, I guess you call them tennis shoes. So very casual and very comfortable. Sneakers. Yeah.
You look hot.
Okay. It's good to know.
I got that outfit for you back in Highland Park.
Yes.
I was shopping at the Ralph Lauren, got a new store.
It's very comfortable.
Yeah, it's the green. Oh, I got that for you when we went to St. Bart's.
Yes. Yeah.
The green looks so good on you.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you came down for the podcast, I saw you had green up, and I went to go change clothes because I had just done another podcast, and I purposely put on like yellow or green to match you a little bit.
Color coordinated, okay.
Yeah. What do you think about my outfit?
I think it's really, really snazzy. I like it. Yeah, it's very sporty looking.
Okay, so we were both wearing sneakers. Mm-hmm. So you have your Hermes sneakers on, which are my favorite. Mm-hmm. You guys, I bought these sneakers for him, gosh, now it's like 4 or 5 months ago, and you've loved them. Yeah. Like ever since.
Oh, they're very comfortable.
They're dreamy on you. You're so handsome. And you always have your signature Rolex. Mm-hmm. Don't leave home without it.
It's the only watch I got.
Do you ever take it off?
Nope.
I didn't think so. So what am I wearing? So I'm asking myself, I got my Chanel sneakers on. To be frank with you, they're not that comfortable, but they're fine for a podcast because I could just sit here.
They look good.
But I put the little, your stretchy things that stretch out the shoes, the men's, I actually put them in this one.
Oh, good.
And now they're much more comfortable. Good. So I could actually go to dinner and stuff in them.
Good.
But they're cute. And then I got a thing with Dolce & Gabbana. So these are Dolce & Gabbana pants. And then my cute bright yellow top is Carrie Rothenthal. I think I'm saying that right. And this hat I got with you when we were in Nashville.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd tell you the brand, but I don't know it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's a fedora with a feather.
Yeah.
And then Christina Wright. So, I podcasted her.
Yeah.
These is the pieces that she makes.
That's very nice.
Because I thought like the leopard would go well together.
Yeah. Very nice.
And we're looking
She takes
good.
Scarves and makes those, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
she takes the scarf and rolls them up.
Yeah.
And then you can pick, you can custom. So I customize this piece. And then she gets the little pendants off of Etsy.
Oh,
and
nice.
Other places like that.
Very nice.
Anyway, so we're going to get started, but at least you're looking hot.
Snazzy.
So we just got back from a trip from New York.
Yeah.
That was so fun. We're going to go dive into his next chapter of his career. And I want to say, if nobody listened to it was like a 30-minute podcast.
Yeah.
The part 1, you should go back and listen to that one first and then this one. Because it really puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
I've gotten so many messages about your psych ward story.
Yeah, that one was, that was a memorable one that where the guy tore the door off the hinges and rigs, and it was quite the experience. Yeah.
The funny part of when I listened back to that podcast is you said you gently took him and pushed him away.
Yeah, they're heavily medicated, and I think they call it the C ward. That's where the most disturbed patients are, and they had them so doped up they were just kind of wandering around like zombies.
Yeah.
And so when they come at you, and again before we went in there was 2 doors. That's when it was a intense ward. There was the holding door, so you went behind it, and then one in front of you, and you could hear them scratching on the door. And they were like, now don't panic, but they're going to come at you, and some of them have feces and stuff under their fingernails, so you don't want them to scratch you. But they're not going to be fast, so you just take them around, turn them around gently, and kind of send them on the other way. And that's sure enough what you did.
I love that story. That's the kind of story, because been married now for 11 years, and I could literally hear that 100 times.
Yeah.
That's the best story.
It was One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest in real life, for sure.
Oh yeah, so New York, we just got back.
Yep.
I was going to talk about that just real quick. We had the best time. Did you enjoy RÜFÜS?
Yes, I thought Rufus Du Sol. I'm not real familiar with the music, but it was a lot of fun, and the venue was great. We went to Sports Illustrated Stadium in New Jersey. Outdoors, weather was perfect. The night before they played, I think it got up in the 90s and it was miserable. So we kind of dodged a bullet there. But yeah, we went and we're in a suite and had a great time. Private bar where you could, have your drinks and all the food you wanted, even though we'd eaten before we went. But RÜFÜS was great. And then we went to a place called The Edge, which was a bar kind of out on a deck, if you will, 101 stories up in New York. In a place called Hudson Yards, I think, and that was some venue. I mean, 100 stories looking out over New Jersey and New York and all the big buildings.
And you remember
at
they
night.
had, if you were on the dance floor, certain sections was glass.
Yeah, so
and
you could see down
all the
101
way
stories
to the 101st floor.
Yeah, very intimidating.
Yeah, I don't think I would go back there if it wasn't the way we did it.
Yeah,
because we got invited through Reza, who has a really great lighting company. He did the lighting for this house.
Yeah, really
He's
nice
doing
guy.
the lighting for the Corona Del Mar house that we're building.
Yep.
And his company, he either invites clients or
Customers.
he had a lot of customers there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he does full VIP service.
Yeah. It's you go in a limo to the concert from the hotel in Manhattan, and great parking right up into the suite. Just first class all the way. Then took us to the Hudson Yards Edge place, had a table, which was, kind of a big deal because it kind of got you out of the throng, because there was probably 500 to 1,000 people there listening to the DJ, and we were kind of behind it, kind of out of the ruckus, and it was phenomenal, and it was a great night.
Yeah, because it's a younger crowd, the club, going back to the club. But we didn't really even get on the dance floor. I mean,
No.
I guess we didn't. No, we didn't really dance. We were behind the ropes.
Yeah.
Behind the ropes.
Yeah.
But what was so funny, you almost got kicked out.
Yes.
Tell them what happened.
Well, I was kind of curious. I big time DJ, and it was fascinating to me. So I went to the restroom, and I was coming back to the tables, and to get there, I went behind the DJ, and I stood there for about 5 minutes just watching him. Wilson, my son, has gotten into that, and it's just fascinating to watch him work their little dials and everything. And so I was standing there watching him for about 5 minutes, and the security guard comes up and he goes, "You can't be here." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I'm just going back to the table there." And he goes, "Well, you're not allowed back here. It's against the rules." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry." And he goes, "You ever been here before?" And I said, "To the Edge?" And he goes, "No, to New York." I said, "Many times." He goes, "Well, you don't act like it." I said, "Okay, fine. I'm just going back to my table." So I went back, and one of the guys we were with, and this is pretty loud. So I went up to him. I said, "You're not going to believe this. This guy, instead of letting me walk like a minute to get to the table, he wanted me to go all the way around, which he made me do, all the way around the crowd, which is like 15 minutes to, kind of weave in and out and get back to the table." I said, I can't believe that. And all of a sudden the guy's standing there, and he goes, "I can hear you." And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, you don't understand the rules." And I could tell he was getting worked up. And I said, "Look, I'm sorry." I said, "But all I was trying to do is get back to the table." And I said, "It just didn't make any sense to me. I had to walk all the way around the crowd instead of walking 15 feet to the table." "Well, those are the rules, and I'm just doing my job." I said, "You're right. You're doing your job. I apologize." So then he kind of backed off a little bit. And what was funny, about an hour later, we were getting ready to leave, and he comes up again, and I'm thinking, "Oh gosh, here we go." And he said, "I just realized you look a lot like the Universal CEO." And I looked at him and I said, "I do, don't I?" And he goes, "I am so sorry. I had no idea. I profusely apologize. I shouldn't have talked to you that way." I said, No. You were just doing your job." I said, and I appreciate that, and I commend you for that." And he goes, "Well, I just started with a company. I really appreciate the job. I can't thank you enough." And I said, "It's no worries." I said, "You're a good employee. I can tell already." And I said, "Doing your job, that's what you're supposed to do." And he goes, "Are you coming back next weekend, some event or something?" I said, "No, we're heading back to California." And then we left. And the story, I mean, I never told him I was a Universal CEO.
You just said, "Yeah, I do look like
I do
him."
look like it.
Which we Googled it.
Yeah. And
We looked it up, and
yeah.
you did look like him.
So anyway, it was funny. And as we were leaving, we got a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, like that was the funniest story. And I think he was waiting for you to pop off again.
Yeah.
And if you would have popped off again, you're out.
Yeah, he'd have kicked me out. I mean, I could just tell he was itching to that first go round. He was wanting to throw me out.
That's a great story. But yeah, we were there 4 nights. We stayed at the Edition Hotel.
Yep. In
Times Square,
yep.
which very skeptical in the
Yep.
beginning because we don't like walking Times Square, and we had to walk home once, and we had to go through there, but
yeah,
it was really convenient.
Yes,
because
and for
you
the
would
most
take
part,
a left,
we could
remember?
Yeah, and we could avoid Times Square.
Yeah,
we could see it from our room, which is kind of neat. The hotel was really nice. Not big rooms, but that's New York. The city was much cleaner than I expected because I think it's been before COVID. I used to go there a lot on business. And I love New York. I love the pace. I love the food. I like the people, actually, because it's just, go, go, go. But the last time I was there, it was pretty nasty. And I was really expecting it to get a lot worse, and actually got a lot better.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clean. Didn't see a lot of homeless folks. Hustle and bustle. It was busy and so on. So, again, I like the pace. Obviously, the food. We went to a great restaurant. Went and saw a show, which was, always fun. So
yeah, I was so excited for you to go because I've been going to New York now for the last few years, either like girls trips or fashion week. And you're like, during COVID, you were like, "I'm done with you, New York. I'm not going back."
Yeah.
So this was exciting. I was so glad we got invited to that because it was like first class and we did the whole thing, and now you like it again. So
yeah,
I think like once a year we'll go.
Yeah, I almost bought a place there years ago. I came close to buying a condo, and after I didn't, it went up like 35%. So I kind of missed out. But at the same time, I'm not sad I didn't buy it because it's gone through a lot of change, and but again, I love the city.
We went to Per Se,
Yep.
which is a Thomas Keller owned restaurant, and he is the one that owns the French Laundry in Napa, which we've been to. Mm-hmm. We've been fortunate enough to been to several times.
Yep.
And I didn't even know this. It's been there for like 9 years.
I know. I'd heard of it, but not 9 years ago, and it was fantastic. The food was
so good,
phenomenal. They had the same blue door as the French Laundry. Service was great. It was a great night. It was after we saw the show too, so we went to see Moulin Rouge, which was very entertaining. I mean, it was one of the better shows I've seen up there.
Yeah, so if you guys go to Per Se, and I think it starts at like $225 or $250 a person, but they do get you on the other things. So you're not going to walk out spending $500. So they get you on the wine, the cocktails, the beer, and then if you get any type of caviar or Wagyu and truffles. Yeah. I think those are their supplements.
Well, the corkage fee was $200, which is by far, by far the highest we've ever paid.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was funny is before we went, I wanted to pick out the bottle that we take, because if you're going to spend $200 on a corkage fee, you might as well bring a $1,000 bottle of wine, because like it makes more sense than bringing a $100 bottle of wine, then to getting a $200 corkage fee on top of that. So we always go big. And I picked the Australian wine that we've never tried. Is it Penfold?
Yes, Penfold's Grange.
Grange, yeah.
Which is a very famous wine because it was the downfall of a prime minister. It was involved in the prime minister of Australia accepting a gift, and he didn't disclose it. And they caught him, and I think he had to resign. It was a big story. So it's kind of a famous wine that way. It was really good, though. We've
been holding on to 2 bottles of that for 7 years.
Yep.
What was funny though, I thought it was around 1,000, and when I picked it out of our wine cellar here in Laguna Beach, you looked at me like I had lost my mind because you thought it was.
Yeah, I thought it was several thousand.
There you go.
Just because of the
because the name and the history.
Yeah.
You're like, that's a $5,000 bottle of wine. I was like, no, honey, it's not. But we ended up Googling it. I think it's $850.
Yeah,
which is so much money for a bottle of wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the ones we sit on for years.
Yeah. It was a good one, though.
But like that's a special occasion to go to a place like Per Se.
Yep.
And then you have that caviar.
Yep.
Oyster caviar.
Oof. That's the same thing as the French Laundry. That's the first dish they bring out. It's oyster.
Pearls.
Pearls was some
cream,
kind of.
fresh.
I think he said they made the oysters specially for them. Yeah.
Okay, so what I was going to say, if anybody ever wants to go there but not spend that much money, they have a bar. It's kind of a bar. It's like more like tables, but you don't. It's a la carte, and you can also request a couch. So the couch
Yep.
overlooks Times Square.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, overlooks the park.
Right.
And you could just do a la carte sitting there overlooking and get just the same flavors without the cost.
Yep. Yep.
And I bet it's pretty open since that restaurant's been there 9 years.
Yeah.
I bet it's pretty available.
Yeah. Especially in the day. I mean, I don't know if they're open in the day, but early in the evening, you'd probably go and do that. Yeah, we can still see the park.
That was a fantastic trip.
Yep.
And then we're going to dive into your career. Right before this podcast, I podcasted Tammy. This is a side note. And we found out some bad news about a handbag that we had bought through a friend's son. And anyway, Tammy is the CEO of Luxe du Jour, and she knows how to authenticate bags. And during the podcast, I hand her the orange Birkin that we had got through a friend's son that he had got over in Singapore. And I was always like wondering about the authenticity of it. Because Joe, how much did you spend on it?
I don't know. It's probably 8,000 or something.
Yeah, 8,000 is like 5 years ago, which is what they sell them at the store then for. But during the podcast, she was like, "Yeah, it's not authentic."
Yeah.
And I like melted. I was like,
Yeah.
And then you walked in because I think you were golfing.
Yep.
And you came in, and we told you on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, but didn't get too upset because what are you going to do? It's done's done. Still looks like a great bag. I'd probably wish you never told us, to be honest with you.
That is
Rather
a good
not know.
point. That is a good point. But I guess we could, take it on trips and not worry about it as much.
Yeah. It's a good looking bag.
Yeah, it was so sad. She's like, "Yeah, they probably spent 2,000 on this, and you gave me 8."
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh well.
that just happened. So it's freshly on my brain. So I wanted to say a little side note on that. Okay, so after all these fun jobs, when I say fun, psych ward and selling clothes at concerts, you dove into a company called Triad up in the hills of Kentucky.
Yep. Triad was a company, a hardware software company, and they specialized in selling computers to auto parts and truck parts guys. And you think, well, what do auto parts and truck parts guys need with computers? If you think about an auto parts store, there's about 100,000 parts on average in each store. And the way the owner had to do it, at the end of the day, they had what's called a card file system. So literally 100,000 cards in this big tray. And they'd have to go through and mark each of those cards with all of their sales so they could reorder it. So it's very manual. Took them probably 2 or 3 hours at the end of the day to do. And Triad actually had a computer specially designed to handle that. And so instead of 2 or 3 hours, it'd take 2 or 3 minutes. And so I started with this company, Triad. Back in those days, I answered an ad from the paper. People read the newspaper. There was an ad. And I remember driving down to Louisville from Lexington, about an hour and a half. And I had this little Toyota Starlet that I'd borrowed. And it had about 1/8 of a tank of gas. And there's just no way I was going to make it down and back, but didn't really have much choice. So said a prayer, please carry me down there and back with this limited amount of gas, and did it. I mean, got down and got back, got the job. Went and took the offer letter to Bill Brown at Kentucky Farmers Bank, back where I grew up, and walked in and said, "Bill, I just got a really good job, with a salary," which is the reason why I went to college, "and take a chance on me. I need to buy a car so I can drive down into the mountains every day." It was 2 hours down, 2 hours back. Had to go down each day. Sometimes I stayed not often, but anyway, I need to go get a car and I need a loan. And sure enough, he said, "Yeah, we'll take a chance on you." And went and got a Toyota Celica and carried around the computer. It was huge. I mean, it was all I could do to lug it in and do a demo and teach people how to use it. So you both sold it as well as trained them. And it was the mountains of Kentucky.
This is when you were 25?
Yeah, right around 25. And
did you know anything about computers?
No. The only reason I did it was I thought computers seemed to be something people are talking about a lot. So if you're going to sell something, why not sell something that everybody's talking about? So
can I circle back on you getting the job? So did you interview?
Yes. Went down and did an interview with a guy named Jack Jodon. That was his name. And I ended up working for a guy named Will Haley, he was a great salesman. And, they trained you, really good training program. That was back in the day where you were on like a 6-month training program. So before you could sell anything, you had to shadow another rep. You had to work in an auto parts store. You had to go out to Sunnyvale, California, Livermore as well. They had 2 locations and get trained, and over a 6-month period. So it was insane.
You went through all that?
Yeah. Before I could sell anything. And so the training was almost like IBM. It was great.
And did they give you a salary when you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it was $12,000 if I remember right. So
technically this is your first sales job.
Yes. The $12,000 salary and $25,000 total package. First real sales job with a real, company, if you will. And it was the mountains of Kentucky. The previous 3 guys to me had been fired. And so the way I looked at that, a lot of people are like, oh man, you got the dead man's territory. And I was like, no, I kind of look at it as those 3 guys probably drove by auto parts stores that didn't look the part, but probably had the most money. Mm-hmm. Because what I found is if you spent money on your business looks, you're probably not spending on the right thing. So what I started doing was going to auto parts stores that were run down. And sure enough, it was a gold mine because these guys were, they were making bank. And a lot of them, about halfway through the day, they had 2 cash registers. So half the day was, the government's share, and then the other half of the day was kind of, what they call mama's share. And, put all the cash in another cash register. So they were hoarding money. And so sure enough, the hard part was trying to convince them. And these are really common sense, smart people, not book smart. A lot of them didn't graduate from high school, much less go to high school, some of them, but really smart, businessmen. And the hard part was trying to convince them they needed a computer because, this was back in the day when, nobody had them. There's no such thing as PCs and all that. So, it was...
They just had their books.
They had their cards, mm-hmm. and they had an accountant would come in and do their books. And, but once I figured out, what the angle was in terms of saving them time, would you rather be home 3 hours earlier, spending time with your family or sitting here doing cards in the back office? Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple harrowing stories. You basically went in, kind of a cold call. You walked in unannounced and started doing your pitch. And I never forget one guy, because I used to wear a suit and tie, which down in Eastern Kentucky, nobody wore a suit and tie. And I remember one guy picked up a monkey wrench, and he's like, "I'm not interested in computers." And I'm like, "I think I get your point." So it was a pretty harrowing experience.
Well, did you say it's because they thought you were from the IRS or something?
Well, yeah, because when I drove down there at first, you'd get behind these big coal trucks, and they'd wave you around. And I'd go to pass them, and there'd be another coal truck coming. It happened constantly. So finally, I asked one of my customers, I'm like, "What's the deal? Why do they keep trying to get me to go head on to these coal trucks?" He goes, "They think you're a revenuer." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "They think you're the IRS. And so, you got to lose the shirt and tie. You got to lose the tie and certainly the jacket." And so I did. I didn't wear, ties and jackets after that and never had a problem. So it so took a while to learn that.
He didn't have to tell you twice.
No, I did. And these are the type of guys that, they'd be standing there all day, had a little bottle of moonshine behind the counter and trying to be a good, customer-oriented sales rep. I'd do me a couple of Hooters with them, and sometimes it'd be like I had to stay for a while.
Oh man, I think our last podcast we talked about moonshine.
Yeah, it's some potent stuff. It'll sneak up on you,
especially the apple pie moonshine we talked about last time. I've actually never asked this question to you. I never even thought about it till just now. So when you got the job for Triad, is that when you already knew you wanted to be in sales?
Oh yeah, I knew I'd want to be in sales since I was a kid. When I started selling the newspapers on the when you're walking out of the grocery store. So that's all my family, my dad, my uncles, everybody was in sales, and it was just a matter of what was I going to sell, and the fact I could get a salary with it was like a bonus. And so I remember the first computer I sold was to a place called Hurley's Truck Parts, and it was Eddie Hurley was his name. Really great guy, but one of those guys didn't go to high school. Really smart, but not book smart, but really business smart, common sense. And I remember I had to train him, how to use the computer, and we were entering the names of his customers, and he would misspell those names. But then I got to thinking, because I was correcting him, and then I got to thinking, well, he's got to recall those names. And so finally I was just like, if he needs to enter them the way he, thinks they need to be entered. So, but at the end of the training, the first week, I said, now, Eddie, when I come back, because this is in eastern Kentucky down on the Virginia border, and I said, computers hate dust. I said, so whatever you do, you got to do something about this dust, because it was a truck parts place. And he goes, okay. So when I came back, I walked in the computer room and I almost fell down. I slipped. I said, what in the world's on the floor? And he said, motor oil. And I said, motor oil? He goes, yeah, it keeps the dust down. I said, Eddie, there's only one thing computers hate worse than dust. It's motor oil. I said, so you got to clean up the motor oil. Okay. And then he said, does this thing have blueprints? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, like something goes wrong, I'll just get in there and fix it. I said, no, you're not going to get in there and fix the computer. We got an 800 number you call and they'll help you, help walk you through it. But this is not like a carburetor or, like working on a truck. But he was a great guy. And I remember to celebrate the deal at the end of that first week, he said, I'm going to buy you lunch. And I said, okay. So we walked next door to the elementary school. And that's where we had lunch. And I'll never forget, I couldn't get my knees under the table because they were little 6-year-olds, little elementary kids, and had these big ladies back, cooking soup beans and cornbread, just really, really good food. And he said, I'm going to splurge and buy you an extra milk, which is a nickel. And we had lunch sitting there with little 6 and 7-year-old kids. It was great.
That's hilarious. So Triad, I remember one of your funniest stories was they shot the screen.
Yeah, I had a systems engineer, and he came back, and he was pretty shaken up. And I said, what's wrong? He goes, I had to go on a service call down to wherever it was in the mountains. And I said, okay. And he goes, I'm just kind of shaken up. I said, why? He goes, well, I go down there, and I asked what was wrong. And before I went, the guy said, yeah, my CRT, which is the terminal, is broken. You need to come down and fix it. So I took me an extra, terminal down there, and I walk in, and he goes, there's a gunshot hole right in the middle of the screen where the guy had gotten frustrated and just shot it. And I said, what'd you do? He goes, I quietly replaced it and left.
Because everyone's packing.
That's right. Well, the thing about it is the guy got so aggravated, and literally you're not supposed to replace something that you damage on purpose, but he was smart enough not to say that. No.
Do you have any other Triad stories?
There was one story I remember that was on national news, actually. I had a customer down there, and it was about 3 years before they became a customer of mine. There was an incident where it was a truck parts place, and there was, 10 people in there, and they were back there grinding rotors or something, so it was really noisy. And a guy walked in with a gun and shot, I think he killed, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 6 or 7 people. And this guy's telling me the story because he was there. And he said that, when he came down, looked down the aisle and pointed the gun at him, he jumped up on a wall and he shot him in the hind end, knocked him over the wall. And then finally he went to another aisle, and one of the other workers who was there said, yeah, he drew down the gun on me and pulled the trigger and it jammed. So he dropped the gun, walked next door, which is where he lived, and sat there and waited on the police. And when the police got there, his story was a wasp had stung him, and he couldn't remember what happened. And it was national news. And he was describing this to me, and it was just, horrifying. I mean, sit there thinking you're in the place where all this happened. And he said what made it really bad was those rotors being ground down made it so loud people couldn't hear. And so he would come up on them before they even knew what was going on. They couldn't hear the gunshots. So that was a tragic story. But yeah, that was one that'd be hard to forget.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Were you did you feel safe?
Down in the mountains, I spent the night a few times, and I would stay in some, let's just call it low cost, because I had to pay my own expenses, low cost motels. And, there was the type of motels where there'd be a lot of screaming and arguing late at night. And I remember a couple times having the chair up against the door.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that somebody didn't try to come in the wrong room. I remember that was where I bought my first mobile phone, which was like a walkie-talkie. It was literally about that big, and cost me $1,200. But I was sick and tired of pulling over the side of the highway with coal trucks whizzing by, using a payphone. And so I splurged and bought my first mobile phone. I wish I'd hung on to it because it'd probably be worth something now. But it was one of those first ones you plugged into your cigarette lighter. And, it ended up saving me a lot of time, made me way more productive. And so I ended up doing really well with Triad because I had that kind of attitude, I think. And then Will Haley, who was my boss, my mentor, left to go to another company, which is called Parts Incorporated. And so I left Triad to join him. And he immediately moved me to Chicago. So I went from, kind of the backwoods of Kentucky up to Chicago.
I bet you're in heaven.
It was interesting because I'd never really been anywhere. I wasn't on a plane until the first time when I was 18. So, always been in Kentucky and so on. So this is my first experience with, a big city, so to speak. And
were you, 27 then? Or?
Yeah, about 27. And, had a great experience there. I did really well. Top rep, top territory, the whole 9 yards. And so this was the first time I got fired. So Will came up and he said, I want to see you at the Delta Crown Room, which back then they gave you free drinks. So we were going to have a business meeting there. And I really thought he was coming up to promote me. So I was like all excited and told my family, I'm going to get my first promotion. And so we go into this Crown Room and he goes, well, we're all out of a job. So what do you mean? He goes, well, we were owned by an English parent out of the UK. And one thing I've learned about dealing with the Brits is they're very spreadsheet oriented and very, very, math based. And they decided this Parts Incorporated was a big auto parts distributor. And we were selling computers to their dealers, to their auto parts stores. And they decided that they were so good for their dealers that they were just going to give them to them. And so they eliminated like 60 jobs overnight. So all of us were out of work. And, they did a decent severance. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do next? And I interviewed for 2 jobs, and it came down to 2 anyway. One was ADP, which a lot of people know them as the payroll people. But they actually had a division that did computers for new car dealerships. So when you go into a new car dealer, ADP had computer systems. And my goal at the time, my big, hairy, audacious goal was to make over $100,000. And the rep before me in downtown Chicago had made $100,000, which back then was a huge amount of money. So I was really leaning towards that job. And the other job I was interviewing for was Computer Associates.
Mm-hmm.
And
we're going to get into that one.
Yeah. And it's funny because the last interview, guy's name was Paul Lancey. He was a classic New Yorker from Long Island, a great guy. And it was the last interview. And he comes in, makes himself comfortable. He's got his feet up on the desk. And the interview's going, I thought, pretty well. And so finally he looked at me and he goes, you ever been to Atlanta? And I'm like, no, never been to Atlanta. And he goes, okay. And then we talked about 5 more minutes and he goes, so you ever been to Atlanta? I said, Paul, I haven't been to Atlanta. I told you that 5 minutes ago, but why do you keep asking me about Atlanta? He goes, here's the thing. We really want to hire you, but you talk funny. We're going to have to move you down south if you're going to work for us. I said, okay.
He heard your Joe-isms already.
Well, and I was debating, okay, do I take CA? Do I take ADP? And a good friend of mine at the time, Jim Little, he said, Charles is one of my clients. He was on Wall Street working for, I think he was working
and Charles Wong,
the CEO.
Of CA.
Yeah. And remember, well, not remember, but at the time, CA was only $163 million in sales. It was, a tiny company. And he said, you need to take the CA job. I said, yeah, but they're so much smaller. And he goes, yeah, but this Charles Wong's he's a brilliant guy. And that's what made my decision. So I packed up my belongings in my car. And I think I may even had a small U-Haul behind me and drove down to Atlanta.
So you're Kentucky, Chicago, and Atlanta, all within a couple years.
Yes. Yep.
So when you said you got fired, that was the first time you'd ever gotten fired?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a feeling of bounce back quick, or was it pretty depressing? How did you handle that?
For a day, it was, a little tough. But then you just got to dust yourself off and say, okay, what's next? And, the thing about the sales world is you can always sell something. Mm-hmm. And I did enjoy the computer side of it and high tech. And so that's what I knew I wanted to do, which is why it came down to ADP and CA. And CA was, at the time, they were $163 million. And they just began getting on a acquisition spree. So I worked there 11 years, and I think we acquired 56 companies when I was there. So, and the first one occurred after I joined. And I joined a really small business unit. So they They did computer software for mainframe, big IBM mainframes, and that was their core business, 95% of their business. But I went to the smallest piece, about 5% of their business, which was financial systems. So we sold general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable for mainframe computers. So a general ledger package would be $500,000, and AP and AR would be $250,000. So big systems.
Do you remember the commission you'd get for those?
I don't, but I know that I definitely had the potential to make over $100,000. So that was what attracted me there.
And did you choose to go into that department because it was only 5%?
No, that was the business unit that interviewed me. But what was funny is the mainframes; those are the big dollars. Then they had IBM had a mid range, which was 3638 was the name of the computers, and those territories were small, like because there were so many of them. Like for example, the rep had one state, Georgia, and then they had what's called digital computers, which back in those days was really popular. Again, that rep might have two states. Well, I had a computer called Data General, which was, just to give you an idea how uncommon they were. I had 13 states. So my first job there, I sold into 13 states out of Atlanta, all the way over to Texas and back.
Is that traveling?
Yeah, traveled like a maniac. Yeah, and I had Puerto Rico, so I went down to Puerto Rico.
So you know how to fly really quick.
That's the beginning of my.
Oh my gosh, you guys! Quick thought on that. Tell them how many miles you have for American and Delta.
I think together it's about 8 million, something like that. Yeah, so there's a bunch of miles, and that really started it because I was on the road a lot, and worked there and did really well selling. I'll never forget one of the big commission checks is the last day of the quarter or last week, and I flew over to Texas, and it was a big deal, quarter end, big commissions because it was accelerators and so forth. And I was dealing with the CEO because typically these are smaller companies that have these data generals. And so I walk in and he's like, "We're going to do the deal." He goes, "We just got a few changes to the contract." And he hands me this thing, and it's like it's in red, like somebody's bled on it because they've marked it up so much. And he goes, "Just a few changes." I said, "It looks more than a few." And he goes, "Well, you guys should be okay with it." So I called our attorney in New York. His name is Belden Freeze. He was a great guy. He was really harsh. And so I sent him the contract. I said, "Belden, I got the CEO. We're going to get on the phone with him." And so, we call him, and Belden said, "This is Belden." And I said, "Well, Belden, can you give us your comments on the contract?" He goes, "Well, we agree we're incorporated in the state of Delaware. After that, we agree with nothing." Boom, and he hung up.
The lawyer?
Yeah. No, the lawyer for us.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there with the CEO. And the CEO goes, "Did he just hang up on us?" I said, "Give me a minute." So I walked out. And I said, "Belden, did you get disconnected?" He goes, "No, I hung up on you." He goes, "We're not doing that." So to make a long story short, that was on a Monday. The quarter end was Friday. I didn't even bring a change of shirts because the guy's like, "Just come over and pick up the contract." Now, what made it tempting was he had a certified check. So he was waving that in front of me. It's probably $100,000, something like that. And so he had the certified check. And he says, "Ready to go. So you guys agree to the deal." So for the entire week, it took us back and forth. I had to go out and buy shirts. People there thought I was working for them. They're like, "Are you a new employee?" And I'm like, "No, I'm trying to sell you something." And then so finally, the last day, I was with the CEO, and we came down to this one issue. I forget what it was. And I said, "Look, John, here's the thing. I know you got a check for me. I appreciate that. But if you don't take this out, we're not doing business." And so we sat there and stared at each other for a couple minutes, and he pulled his pen out and marked it out and initialed it. And so we had the deal.
That's one of those moments you wait for the person to say the next word.
Next one that talks loses. Yeah. So that was, I never forget that deal. So there, that ended up going well, and I got promoted to be what was called a branch manager, and it was an experiment. So they never had one at CA, and they moved me down to Hollywood, Florida, which is right outside of Fort Lauderdale. And I had me as kind of a player coach, a sales rep, and a sales engineer. So it was a 3-man team, and it was an experiment, and we did really well, and ended up selling more than the entire region. It was really, really something.
Were you pretty young to be a branch manager?
Yeah, very young. So, and the fact that it was the one of a kind was even more kind of special to it. So from there, we did so well, they did 10 branches. So they actually created 9 more.
How many were on your team?
3. There was only me and the sales rep and an SE. And we had the state of Florida and Puerto Rico, and we really did well. And so, did extremely well there. And then that was the story. I don't know if I've told it before about going up for the promotion.
Wait, for CA?
Yeah.
Oh, I talked about that in your introduction.
Yeah.
Like you go into a job like they had no idea you were coming.
Yeah, it was, I was very successful as this branch manager, and, CA was very acquisitive. So we bought this company called Colonet. And when we bought them, they became a big part of our financial systems business. And the new guy came in who was going to run the East, and there was an opening in Atlanta for vice president. And, I wanted that job, and I thought I'm going to get it because, I'm by far and away the best producer and performer on the team. And sure enough, I didn't get the job. So the guy who came in gave it to his guy from the acquired company. And as luck would have it, the guy said, I don't want to work for CA. So that guy turned down the job. And I thought, well, this guy doesn't know who I am, obviously. So I'm gonna fix that myself. And I bought my own plane ticket on my own money to New York.
That's what I thought.
Because we were based in Long Island. And I flew up there and unannounced walked into the office of the guy who ran worldwide sales. And to this day, I'll say he's probably my all-time mentor. I mean, his name is Arnie Mazer, and he was just a brilliant guy. He's a lawyer by training. He was very intense, but just a great guy, and still love him to death. But he didn't know who I was, and so I marched into his office, and Christine Moore, his secretary, was sitting there, and she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, you need to tell Arnie I'm his next VP of the Southeast." She goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Joe Sexton. I live in Hollywood, Florida, and I run a branch down there, and I've done really well, and I'm here to get the job." And she goes, "You don't have an appointment." I said, "I know, but I spent my own money because I didn't want them to fire me for spending company money." I said, "I spent my own money. It's $1,200 or something, a lot of money." And I said, "I'm not leaving until I see him." And she said, "He's not going to see you." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to sit in the lobby till he does." And so that was in the morning. And, as the day goes on, I know he keeps calling because she's like, "Yeah, he's still here." And so I finally, I said,
he would call the secretary.
"Yeah, she's still out there." It's like I was stalking him, He's probably afraid of me. But, and then finally I looked at her and I said, he's got to go to the bathroom. So I'm going to be here when he goes to the bathroom at least. And she goes, "No, he's got a bathroom in his office." And to this day, the reason why I have a bathroom in our office here at this house is because that's always been my dream, is to have an office with a bathroom. Because I always thought that was so cool.
That is cool.
And so finally, at the end of the day, he calls and she said, "Okay, you got 5 minutes." I said, "That's all I need." So I went in there and I sat on the edge of my seat and I started, pounding the numbers, and everything was objective. And, this is my performance and I deserve the job and so on. Then finally he started chuckling. I said, "What's funny?" I said, "I spent my money to come up here. I don't think it's funny." He goes, "Hang on a second." So he picks up the phone and he calls Rich Chiarello, is the guy who was running the East. And Rich and I ended up being great friends. But he said, "Rich, come on in here." And so Rich came in there and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I want to introduce you to your new VP of the Southeast." And Rich is like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, his name's Joe Sexton. You guys get to know each other. He's going to do great."
Oh, I bet he was ticked.
Oh, man. He was like, he managed a grimace smile, but I could tell he was not happy.
You were younger than him, I'm assuming?
Oh, by far. So we sat there and exchanged pleasantries, and then we went out in the hallway, and his exact quote to me was, "Not if you miss a quarter, but if you miss a month, I'm going to fire your ass." He said, are we clear? And I said, Crystal. And so I ended up being the VP of the year and did really well for him. And like I said, we ended up being great friends, but that's how I got started. And I think the lesson I try to share with people is not that, just because I went up and I forced my way in and all that, that's not the message. You gotta have, the track record behind you to earn the right to ask. But at the same time, when you do have that track record, speak up, because, people can't read your mind. They don't know what it is you want. And I always tell young people, you got to tell your boss constantly, "Here's what I want. Here's what I'm working toward. Here's my goal." And sometimes you got to take matters in your own hands.
I heard you tell that to Emma. It was like a month ago.
I did. Yes.
So Emma's your daughter, and
Yep.
she just got a promotion.
She did. She
And
just
I
got
heard you telling her that same advice.
Yes.
Because she had to prove herself.
She had to prove herself.
But by the way, because she's younger.
Yes. And I think she was, I don't know if it's still true, but she was the only female on a 15-person team.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's done really well and just got promoted to be what's called an enterprise sales rep, which is out in the field. And she'll, I think she'll have California again as her territory. So she's very happy, and I'm very proud of her. And she got in there, and she's taken a lot of my advice.
You're such a good mentor. Like, you help her so
yeah,
much.
she's a very coachable, hardworking. I mean, that's the thing, is she's not afraid of hard work. And
this is what you always say. You go, I know how to spot them. I see them, and I'm telling you, it's not because she's my daughter.
Yep.
She is going to be an amazing salesman.
Yes.
You've been so adamant about that.
Yeah, well, because she has those qualities, and sure enough, she's proven herself, and she'll continue to do great.
Yeah, that was so neat when she got that raise.
Yeah. That was it was well deserved, and she was thrilled, and she'll kill it.
So your biggest mentor too is Charles Wong, the CEO of CA.
Yes.
And you just loved him.
Charles was a guy who was very harsh on one hand, very intense. So Charles came over from China when he was a child, probably 4 or 5. And it was back when the regime changed over there. And his dad, who I think was an attorney, when they changed regimes and communism came in, they were seeking him out. I mean, to kill him and put him in prison and so on. So I believe Charles and his 2 brothers and his parents came over to America in the bottom of a boat. And as long as I knew Charles, he hated boats. He just had a really bad experience with it. But he came over, and he started with a business partner of his on his credit card, his business partner's credit card, with $1,000 line of credit. And early sales reps got paid in suits, and but he was a brilliant guy. I know when he first came to the States, he lived in Queens, I think, and didn't speak very good English. So he was always bullied, and he always had kind of a chip on his shoulder to prove himself. He ended up being worth a couple $1 billion, but I just learned so much from him. Some things, that you don't do, and then some things you do. But I remember walking around an office up in New York with him. First of all, he had a photographic memory. If he met you once, he knew you from the time we were 100 people. Like I said, I started as 163 million. When I left, we were doing about 4 billion.
And he developed the software.
He and his partner, Russ Arch, developed the software. And Charles was really good at marketing and selling and so on, as well as coding. And so they started the company that way. And then they started doing acquisitions. But he was the type of guy, I was walking around the office one time, and this is when we were very successful. And he bent over and he picked up a rubber band, he put it around his wrist. And I noticed he had like 6 of them. I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "That's money." So paper clips, rubber bands, and he was always that way. He was always like, and the one thing he told me was, you in business, you focus on bringing more money in than spending money out. And like, we acquire these companies, they'd have lavish offices with art and so on. And the first thing you do is sell all that off. And because he would be like, we don't want to be spending money on offices and so on. We want to spend money on our customers and our product and so on. But he was very intense. He could be, I remember the first time, and when I got promoted to be senior VP, which was a big deal back then. I was the youngest one by far. And my first meeting in New York, it's kind of an oblong table, and Charles is at one end, and there's an open chair at the other, and then all the senior VPs and the president, everybody are on the sides. Well, I took the open chair, and sure enough, the forecast review came around to me, and what are you going to do, kid? He always called me kid, and I puffed up my chest and threw out some number, and he goes, "Are you kidding me?" He looked at Arnie, he goes, "What are you doing with this kid in the room?" He goes, what are you doing? He's a senior VP. Are you kidding me with that kind of number? And he like 5 minutes, he's berating me. And I can feel myself like sinking down in the seat. So anyway, after it's over, Arnie's like, enough. He's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And so at the end of it, I was sweating. And so what was funny is the next time we had a meeting, there was a new guy. And before the meeting started, everybody said, "That's the new guy's seat." And so it was deliberate. So they had set me up.
The open chair.
Yeah, the open chair was where the new guy went. And sure enough, Charles did the same thing. So he was one of those guys, he kind of beat the ego out of you. He was a really big believer in team. At the same time, it was a very competitive environment. People could work there without a college degree. He didn't care. It's like as long as you could sell and perform. It was very intense, and just learned a lot of lessons from Charles. I remember one time we had a CIO conference, which is the big executives, and by then Charles had written a book, and he was kind of people don't realize this, but CA was the first billion-dollar software company, not Microsoft. So we were the first company worth $1 billion. And so Charles is kind of famous, and he'd written a book. And so we'd have these CIO, which is the executive events for the weekend. They bring their wives and play golf, and we do a business pitch and so on. And we had these side meetings where they got to meet Charles about deals. And I'll never forget, there was a deal on the table, and we were losing to a company called Tivoli, which I got another story about them. They were a small little company. We were kind of the big guys on the block. And so I briefed him. I said, this guy, they're leaning towards Tivoli, and his guys really like it. He goes, okay, I got it. So this guy comes in, and we're sitting in this suite, and we're talking, and the guy's like, my guys really want to go with Tivoli. And Charles looks at me, and he goes, are you kidding me? He goes, what's wrong with you? And again, he starts like berating me, belittling me, and the guy's like, no. Joe's a great guy. He's doing a great job. Charles, please. It's not his fault. It's my guys. Charles is like, okay. So we talk about 10 more minutes, and sure enough, it comes up again, and Charles goes off again. He's like, I ought to take you off why are you senior VP? And it's just like, really? And I'm starting to think maybe he's serious, And the guy's like, no, Charles, here's the thing. My guys are idiots. I'm going to go back and overrule them. We're doing business with you. He goes, you sure? And he goes, I'm positive. So anyway, the door closes, and Charles looks at me and he starts grinning. He goes,
wink, wink.
Did that do it? I'm like, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if you were serious or not, but that was the kind of guy he was. I
remember when he passed away maybe like 4 years ago.
Something like that.
I remember you were very upset.
Yeah, he had lung cancer, and what was ironic about it?
Moving for you.
Yeah, what was ironic was he had lung cancer. He had quit smoking years and years ago, and Arnie, as a matter of fact, it was kind of a joke because the first 10 minutes of every meeting we had in New York would be Charles riding Arnie about quitting smoking. Arnie, you got to quit smoking. And so, but the ironic part is he died of lung cancer. But I remember there was one time when we missed a quarter and the stock tanked. It went from, say $20 to $4 or something. It was really dire. And we, because Charles is an intense guy, and we were thinking he's just going to be brutal, right? What ends up, we go up to New York, and we're all dreading it. It's like, this is really going to be bad. And he comes in, and he's got this T-shirt. And he said, everybody in the company is going to get this T-shirt. And on the T-shirt, it said, have you hugged your sales rep today? And he goes, so everybody wants to blame sales. So when things are going great, sales doesn't get enough credit. And things are going poorly, everybody wants to blame sales. He goes, in the end, it's a team. And the only way we're going to get out of this, we're going to sell our way out. And so we're going to love on our salespeople. And the thing I learned with Charles, and it took me a while to figure it out, was when things were going great was when he was the harshest. But when things went poorly, that's when he loved on you.
That's exactly how you were.
Yeah, I took that lesson. That's probably one of the best lessons I learned from him, is it's counterintuitive to human nature, because when things go poorly, you want to lash out. You get emotional, and it's like, this stinks, and you want to lash out at people and so on. And it's the direct opposite thing you should do, because when it's going well, you got to guard against complacency. And that's what he was doing. He was like, really pushing. But when things turn the other way, and especially if you were working hard and doing the right things, that's when he'd love on you. And it was really interesting, because the feeling you got was that's what went unexpected. And so it was so impactful because it was the direct opposite of what you thought he would do. And that was one of the best lessons I took away from him.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
Charles Wong's sister, right?
Sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the story about her on the phone call.
So she was one of my...
What's her name?
Her name was Anita Lum. And
Anita Lum?
Yeah. And it's a very, very intense lady. And at the time, CA had a lawsuit against a company called EDS, which is the company that Ross Perot started years before that. Ross was gone, so he wasn't at EDS anymore, I don't think. But anyway, what EDS did was they were outsourcers, so people could go to them and let them run their data centers. And what EDS did was they took our software, which was really meant for one-to-one. So you buy a license, it's for you, and you sell them one at a time. But they took these licenses, they were using it for multiple customers. And our argument was that wasn't allowed. It was one license for one customer. And so there was a lawsuit, and I think it was for $2 billion. It was for a lot of money. And so the stakes were really high. And Anita, she was a very intense person, and she was responsible for EDS. So anything that had to do with EDS customers or EDS, she was the one that was in charge. You had to go through her. You had to go through her team. Everything had to be blessed and so on, because it was just, you make a mistake, it could cost the company.
You've told me a few times, like, most people did not, well, she didn't like most people, but she loved you.
Yeah. She was a big fan of mine and was always very kind to me. And I just seemed to get along with her. But there was one time where, we had I think it was a customer on the call, and he was an executive VP and he had his team with him and so on. And she basically, in the middle of the call, called him a lying bad word. And he was like, "Excuse me?" And she goes, "Yes, you're a lying bad word." And he goes, "I thought that's what you said." And he hung up the phone and told all of his people, "Get off the phone." So I called her and I said, "Anita, you can't do that. I mean, he's a customer, and I understand that you think he's in the wrong and so forth." She goes, "Yeah, but he's a lying bad word." And I'm like, "I understand." So that was the kind of person she was. Now, the outcome of that story was EDS settled with us, and I think it was for $1.2 billion. So CA ended up winning the lawsuit. And she was, I had a sales rep one time, his name was Bill Lee. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the office and he came in, he was white as a ghost. He's one of my best sales reps. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" He goes, "I just got off the phone with Anita." And I said, "Okay." And she goes, "She fired me." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I called the help desk, the EDS help desk, thinking I'd get one of her people, and she answered the phone. And I guess I didn't answer her questions the way that she wanted me to answer them, so she fired me." So I said, "Okay, I want you to go and get a drink. I want you to go home and let me take care of this." So I called Anita. I said, "Anita, he's one of my best reps." She goes, "Yeah, but he's an idiot." I'm like, "Okay, maybe. But, you got to give him a break."
She
please.
probably said, "Well, he is an idiot." Twice, like she said to the other guy.
So anyway, I was able to talk her into giving his job back, and he ended up doing extremely well. But yeah, Anita Lum she was a character.
And how long were you there?
I was there 11 years. I started in 87 and left in 98. And I think I was a rep for a year and branch manager for a year, and then became VP, and then ended up being a senior VP. So it was a wild ride. I remember when I got the job to be senior VP, Arnie came down and he said, "We want to offer you a promotion, but we're really worried that you'll take it." And I said, "Really? So what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we want you to go over to Dallas and we want you to run the Southwest, but you paint a picture, make it as black as you can, and it's worse over there. It's totally destroyed." The guy running it was, not a good guy. And he said, "I want you to take a day and think about it." I said, "Okay." So I came back and I said, "Look, I want to take the job. I want, give me the opportunity." So moved over there, and sure enough, it was really bad. And the first thing I did, and this is probably not going to be allowed nowadays, I know it wouldn't be, but the morale was so bad. I had 9 managers, and I got them all in a room, and I said, "Give me the name of the person who has the worst attitude here." And 6 of them said the same guy. And so I yelled out at my admin, Nancy Bond. I said, "Nance, get this guy. Where is he?" "He's down in Houston." I said, "Get him on a plane, get him back up here, get him in my office." And so he came in and walked in that afternoon. And he said, "Good to meet you." And I said, "Let me just cut to the chase. We're parting ways." And he goes, "Okay, can I ask why?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I asked, 9 managers who had the worst attitude, and 6 of them said you." He goes, "Well, they're right. I hate it here." He goes, "I've been here 11 years and, I just can't stand it anymore." I said, "Okay, I get it." I said, "Here's the thing. We're going to take very good care of you. We're going to be very fair. We're going to give you a good package and so on." I said, "But I'm trying to turn this thing around. And before aptitude, I got to have attitude. And you're just not a good fit for the team." He goes, "I get it." And
you helped him out too.
Yeah. He goes, "I actually think I'll be happy now." I said, "Great." So then I called everybody in the business unit together, got them all in the room, and Arnie was there. He was there with me. And to be honest with you, I was nervous as a cat because that was my first big meeting with these people. And I stood up and said, I just want to let you know I've sent so-and-so home. And mouths dropped. I could, when you're talking to an audience, they don't recognize how much you can see the reaction. And it was visible.
Woo!
They didn't do that, but they were shocked. And so anyway, I said, here's the thing, before we get aptitude, we're going to have attitude. And you got to give me that first. And this is the point where we're going to start turning this thing around. And I tell you, I had 10 people line up after that meeting saying, how did you know? And I said, I just asked. And one guy told me, he said, I'd go to get coffee in the morning. And if that guy was there, I'd just keep walking because he'd ruin my day.
Yeah.
And so I learned a really good lesson with that is, when people are not having success, especially in sales, there's nothing more miserable. And as miserable as it is for the company, they're not succeeding, it's also miserable for them. And, keeping them too long is doing a disservice, not just to the company, but also to the person. So fail fast. And especially if people have bad attitudes, turn things around is really important.
So your transition to Mercury, how did that come about?
So with CA, I had a situation where, I'd been there 11 years and, there was a new person leading the company and he and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye. He had his favorites and so on, which is fine. And so he came down and said, we want you to move to New York to run channels for us. Now, he knew I didn't want to move to New York, right? I mean, 2 young kids, I'm in Texas. And so that was effectively a way, that's my second, time being fired. Because that was, he gave me a job that, this is your choice. And he made it clear, the other choice is not to stay here. And so I said, with all due respect, I'm going to opt out. And so, I was out of the job.
So that's the second time you've been fired?
Yes, yeah. And so
we're going to get to the other two.
Yeah. And so from there, ended up going to a company called Mercury Interactive, which at the time was doing about $300 million, a really good SE for me. Hardy Burnett actually was working for me at CA, and he was at Mercury. And he said, you got to come over here. The software is unbelievable. It works and so on. And so I actually researched it on my own and took his word for it. And so I reached out to the guy running sales, and he wouldn't take my call. So we had an initial call, and he wouldn't return it after that. So I went one step above him, went to the president, and I said, you don't know who I am, but you need to. And here's my background and so on and so forth. And he goes, okay, I'll give you a chance. Come on out here and let's interview. So I went out there and ended up, he and I got along. And so I ended up getting that job. And it was actually a step back. So from CA, which was doing $4 billion at the time, to go to a little $300 million company, not that it's little, but, a company that was, nobody knew who it was. It was
Did
a pretty
you have
big,
to move again?
No, I could stay in Dallas. And I had, instead of the country, I had central U.S., which was very, very small compared to what I had at CA. But I said, look, I'm going to bet on myself. So you give me this opportunity. I know it's smaller and step back because that's what they're concerned about. It's like, you've had this big job. We're afraid you're not going to be happy. I said, you just give me a shot. And they did. They took a chance on me. And I think probably a year and a half, maybe later, I got promoted to run North America.
Wow. Only a year and a half?
Well, we did really well as an area, the central area. And I ended up going out for the interview, and another one of my mentors, who I think the world of, the CEO at the time, was named Amnon Landon, and he's fantastic. And I went out for the interview, and I was competing against 2 other guys, and both of them had been there, I don't know, 7, 8 years. They were both longtime Mercury employees, and everybody knew them. And one guy was running inside sales. He ended up being CEO of a company, so he was really good. And the other guy was running the Southeast, been there for a long time, and he was well thought of. But I went into Amnon's office with a folder, and in it I had a couple pieces of paper, and I laid it in front of him, and he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "That's my interview." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you can see my performance since I've gotten here, and I know the other 2 guys you're talking to. They're great guys, and everybody knows who they are. But if you want tenure, then go with one of those 2 guys. If you want performance, I'm your guy." And I think that struck a chord with him. And Amnon and I ended up getting along, really well after that. I still consider him to be
like the lesson that you were talking about earlier is you have the proof.
Well, it's objective. And I think a lot of times, especially in the sales world, It's based on performance. And, the objective thing about sales, and the reason why I got into sales is because, and Emma's the same way, she was in a marketing job and she's like, I'm working twice as hard as people who are my counterparts and we're making the same money. And I was the same way. It's in sales. If, you put the work in and you deliver the results, you'll make the money and you'll out earn the person who's maybe not working as hard, not performing as much. And I always like that kind of capitalistic, view. It's like you're paid for performance and all the other stuff is a little bit of noise.
Okay, so you're at CA, you're doing the best that you could possibly be. The jaw-dropping question is, how are you doing what you're doing, and then you end up in a back office being interviewed by the FBI?
Well, it was actually 2 years after I left CA. So I left CA, was gone and so on, off to Mercury. And they got caught up in a fairly big scandal at the time. And the scandal was called the 35-day accounting, is what the 35-day month is what it became known as. And back in those days, software companies, and not that it made it right, I didn't know any different, but they would backdate a contract. So if your quarter closed, let's say on December 31st, they would leave the books open, and as long as you could backdate the contract to December 31st, let's say it's January 4th, you could count it for that quarter. And with software, since you didn't ship anything, there was no physical record of the software going out. And candidly, I mean, I think, without naming names, a lot of big companies were doing it. So, and we didn't know any better. I mean, at CA, it was kind of like, this is the way it was. And so anyway, after I'd left, maybe 2 or 3 years, I get a call, and the FBI wants me to come in and talk to them about what I knew, from working there. I was there 11 years. So the first interview I went to was with a gal, and I knew that, and again, my attitude was, I'm going to tell the truth. You ask me a question, I'll tell you the truth. I have no dog in the fight, no axe to grind.
Did you get any pushback?
No,
from
it was
CA on that?
no, not a bit. It was, they were talking to a lot of people, and so my attitude was, I'll tell you whatever questions you want answered, I'll answer them, because, like I said, I had no axe to grind, no dog in the fight. And this first FBI lady clearly didn't know what she was doing, and I knew that when she asked me a question, what is Windows NT? Which I looked at her and I said, are you serious? And the company, CA, was paying for my attorney, because it was representing them. It was like $1,000 an hour. So this is, not cheap. And she goes, no, I'm serious. She goes, I don't know what that is. Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And Emma was about 5 at the time. And so I looked at her, and this is a deposition. So I looked at her and I said, Daddy loves you. And she said, excuse me? And I said, that's what I say to my 5-year-old. You said, talk to you like a 5-year-old. That's what I tell my daughter. Stop that. That's stenographer, And she said, this is not funny. And this is not a joke. And I said, I know it's not a joke. I said, but I got to be honest with you. We're sitting here with all these high-powered attorneys and so on. You're asking me questions like that. I said, you're wasting my time, and you're wasting everybody's time. And so the interview ended, and she was all mad and so on. And, I kind of went back. And so then everything kind of went quiet. And about a year later, it resurfaced again. And so that was the most nerve-wracking, because there's something that, even though you know that, you haven't done anything wrong or anything, you get this call that says, this is so-and-so with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need you to come down to the office.
Intimidating.
Yeah. So, and again, they provided an attorney, and I went down there. Here we go with the same drill. And I knew that these guys were way sharper, because the first question they asked me was, when did you learn how to do backdating of a contract, which they called the 35-day month? And I said, the first day I was trained. That's how they trained you to do it. And again, there was a lot of companies that were doing it. The problem that CA had was the guy who was running at the time tried to deny it. And he was a very smart guy. Charles had left by then. And so he's a very smart guy, and he thought he could, kind of outwit him, and ended up didn't. And so I knew right then they were on to the issue. And sure enough, it ended up, didn't go well.
Did he go to prison?
He did. Yeah. Yeah. So it was, a very, very sad thing.
Because you guys were probably pretty close.
Yes. Yeah. He had kids my kid's age. The head of sales went to prison as well. It was a really bad thing. But
So it sounds like they were using you guys as an example.
Yes.
There were so many companies doing it.
And again, I look back at that, and this is just my opinion, doesn't mean it's right, but probably if they had said, yes, we were wrong, we shouldn't have done it, they'd find them, and, that'd have been the end of it. But, they always say the cover-up's the worst, and that was kind of
it's like getting in front of a judge and you say you're not guilty and you blame it on everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a very, very sad time for those folks, and, really set CA back for a while, but they ended up getting acquired years later for billions of dollars. So, they ended up doing okay in the long run. But yeah, that was a very intense period of time, that, had to go through. And that was, a couple different scenarios. And yeah, it was interesting, let's just say.
The fact that you've been interviewed by the FBI.
Yeah, the thing about it is it's intimidating because of who they are, but at the same time, I never really was worried because I just told the truth.
Just doing your job.
Yeah, just unvarnished. It's like I said, I have zero axe to grind or, dog in the fight. It's like, you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, try to expand or, it's you ask me the question, I'll tell you exactly the answer. And
so when you left Mercury, what was your position?
So when I left Mercury, we got acquired by Hewlett Packard for $4.5 billion, and that was started there when they were $300 million, and grew that business to $1 billion. So we tripled the size of the business.
So Mercury, from the time you worked there till the end, it tripled.
Tripled, yeah. We took it from 300 to $1 billion.
And I bet you had a major role in that.
Well, I ran North America. That was, the engine of the company. But I'll say something about Mercury. Some of the best people I've ever worked with were at Mercury Interactive. Matter of fact, if you look at the Silicon Valley, it's spread throughout with Mercury people. It's unbelievable, the talent. I think it was a tribute to Amnon and the entire team he put together. Development was in Israel, which is the best developers I think that I've seen in the world. Company based in California. And just unbelievable talent, and really just an incredible ride. That one had a little bit of a kind of a different ending as well, because another scenario there. So there was an issue with companies in Silicon Valley. They granted what's called stock options, and the stock options, you get a price. So let's say they price it at $1. That means you can buy the stock at some point in the future when it vests. So you have a 4-year vesting period, and if you're there 4 years, you have the right to buy them. And so what you're really wanting is the lowest strike price. So if you buy it for $1 and the stock's at 10, you want to get a low strike price so you make a profit, right? And they were involved in backdating stock options for executives. And so the concept was, they would go back in time after the grant and give a strike price that was, advantageous to the executives. Well, that wasn't allowed. And what was interesting about it was we were the first company that got called out for that. I think there was 130 companies, something like that, but by the time it ended, and it ended when they got to Apple. And so Apple was the golden goose, and all of a sudden it wasn't an issue anymore.
They were doing it too.
Everybody was doing it. Again, doesn't make it right, but so we were the first example. And on the first day of the fourth quarter, our CEO, our CFO, and general counsel all got sent home. And so our competitors, were circling around, sending emails. Mercury's done. They're going to go out of business. We got a new CEO. His name is Tony Zingali. TZ, he's a great guy, who came in. And we rallied the troops. We, as an executive team, we got together and said, here's the thing. We're each going to take X number of customers. We're going to go out to them. We're going to appeal to, because Mercury had great software. We had 75% of the market in one product, and we were extremely customer focused. So we would think nothing about putting somebody on a plane from Israel to come over and be in the U.S. the next day if there was a problem. It was insane. How people loved us, and we just took care of them. And so we went to them and we appealed to them and saying, we're in trouble. I mean, this is not good. We've got this issue that our competitors are making a big deal out of. and almost to a customer. And it was through the effort of all the executives and all the employees. They all said the same thing. We're not going to let you down. You were here when we needed you, and we're going to be here when you need us. And we ended up having the biggest quarter in our history.
Wow. And that was under Tony.
That was under Tony. That was in that fourth quarter. And, the stock went from the toilet, which is basically what happened in that beginning of the fourth quarter. And we ended up selling the company to HP for $4.5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a huge
what year
turnaround.
was that?
We traded in 2007, I think, 2006, 2007.
I wonder what that would be equal to now.
Oh, it'd be 20 billion now.
Wow.
I mean, it was a lot of money to be paid, at that time.
That's so inspiring that you were such a big part of that.
Yeah, I ended up. They gave me the MVP award that year. I was very, very proud of that.
That's neat. Oh, I saw that video.
Yeah.
Is that where Emma comes out on the stage?
Well, they surprised me. They had the company kickoff in Dallas, and Tony got up and was going to announce the MVP, and I had no clue. And unbeknownst to me, they had gotten Wilson and Emma and limoed them to the event, and they were standing off in the wings, and I had no idea they were there. And when they made the announcement, I was shocked. And Emma ran up on stage, and it's on video. I'm turning my back, walking away, and the crowd's like going crazy because she's running up on stage, and turned around, and gave her a big hug, and it was one of the highlights of my career.
Oh, that's so sweet. I saw that VHS.
Yes, yeah, back in the day. But so that ended up being a great run, and we ended up getting acquired by HP. Stayed there for wasn't long because I've just had ever since I've been doing software, hardware is different. And, it's a big company, and I just didn't have a good experience in big companies going from a smaller company. And there, ended up getting fired again. And so ended up working for a guy.
Get knocked down.
Yeah. Ended up working for a guy who was a hardware guy. And I used to joke he couldn't spell software if you spotted him soft. He just didn't understand software. He's a hardware guy, and he and I just did not get along. We clashed, and I had a condition in my employment that if they changed my responsibilities, I got a package. It was an acquisition package. So I called up my boss's boss, and I said, Tom, I want that package. I can't work for this guy. I mean, he's just bad. And he's like, I understand, and I get it. And Tom was running all of software, so he kind of saw what I saw. But anyway, long story short, a couple of days later, I was up on stage, and I was talking to about 300 people, half of them Mercury and half of them HP people, and I was welcoming them, the HP people and so on. And my admin stands in front of me, and like down there, and she's going like this. And I said, hold on a second, Nance, what's going on? She goes, you got to call in the lobby. And I said, well, tell him, I'll call him back. She goes, no. He's insisting you come out right now. So I looked out and I said, okay, somebody else called somebody up. So you carry on and I'll be right back. So I go out there, and there's this guy that I was talking about who was on the phone, who was my boss. And he goes, I'm firing you. I said, okay, that's fine. And I said, I get it. I said, I don't like you. You don't like me. I understand. But I'm going to get my package. He said, no, you're not. He said, you're not getting your package. And I'm firing you, and that's the end of it. I said, really? So you don't even have the courtesy to come and do this in person, number one. And now you're going to take away what's rightfully mine. I said, that's fine. I'll see you in court. And so I ended up going and hiring an attorney. And it was so black and white.
Yeah.
HP is a big company, and they had a lot of lawyers, and I'm sure they were just going to, do whatever they had to do. But I got this attorney, worked on a contingency, and, we sued him and won, got, everything that was owed to me. And the funny part is I was in Europe, taking a trip, taking some downtime and so on. And I get a call from my attorney, and he said, are you sitting down? I said, no, I'm actually standing up in Europe. What's up? He said, you're not going to believe it. We got another check for the same amount that you got for your settlement. And it's made out to you and everything. He goes, what do you want me to do with it? I said, are you serious? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, first of all, I want you to write void on it because we're not cashing it. Because he was like, hey, you ought to put it in the bank and draw interest till you get it. No. This is wrong, and it's a mistake. I said, but put void on it and put it in a safety deposit box, and we'll deal with it. And so I called them and they said, look, you got to give us some time to sort this out, because what I found out was, nobody wanted to take responsibility for sending out a wrong check. And I think it took about 3 months before they finally called and said, okay, we want you to send the check to this attorney with void on it. And, we got it taken care of. So anyway, that was the end of that story. Now,
Temptation.
the funny part is a year later, Tom called me up and said, I want to talk to you about coming back. And I said, okay. So we met at a sports bar in Palo Alto. I'll never forget it. And walked in and he goes, you're right. We fired that guy because he was terrible. And he goes, so we want you to come back. And I was at McAfee at the time and running North America, loved who I was working for. Dave DeWalt, was a great CEO, and we were just really getting rolling. And he goes, give me a number. So I gave him a really big number. And he's like, you got to be crazy. And I said, no, I'm not crazy. You asked me what the number would be. That's what it is. And he goes, we can't do that. I said, okay, that's fine.
Oh, I bet that made you feel better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And Tom and I remain good friends and so on. But, I kind of understood that would not fly. But, asked me what it would take. And I told him.
So looking back on it, what's the biggest lesson you learned from the Mercury experience?
I think the thing I took forward from Mercury that I used the rest of my career, because each stop along the way, I think I've put certain things in my bag that has really helped me in the future. But with Mercury, it was a great product or products. There's no doubt. But the thing I learned, though, was the people. And one of the best books I've ever read is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And in it, he talks about if you get the right people on the bus goes to great places, and you get the wrong people off the bus at the same time. And as I look back at Mercury, just the people and their impact in the Valley. I mean, Amnon Landon I mentioned. Certainly, Tony Zingali came in and did just a bang-up job taking over for Amnon. Jay Larson, who was my boss, was phenomenal. Went on to do great things at, a couple other companies. John McCracken is probably the best sales leader I've ever hired from off the street. I mean, I've inherited some guys that are unbelievable, but John was the best guy. And as a matter of fact, I remember people told me you'll never get him because he's so good and so on. And I'm like, okay, we'll see. And talked John into joining me and us and going on the journey. And he ended up being just phenomenal. Went on to be a CRO at Jive and just had a great career. Mike Fay, who I kind of found as an SE and ended up running as my right-hand guy, the SE organization. And he's gone on to do unbelievable things, which I'll maybe talk about in a later podcast. But, Mike Fay was phenomenal. The whole leadership team, from Amnon to Zohar Gilad to Yuval Scarlett, Christopher Lockhead came in and changed the story. Unbelievable marketing person to this day, has I don't know how many #1 books, top podcast, and it just goes on and on and on. I know I'm gonna forget people, but it's the people that came into Mercury and eventually went out into the Valley. You just look back at that, and that was the secret. And I think that's the thing I carried forward. Is I was always very passionate about getting the right people on the bus to take the bus to the right places.
Well, this has been fascinating. The fact that so on this podcast, fired 3 times.
Yes.
So we're wrapping up this episode, and you've been fired 3 times in this podcast.
Yep.
On the next one, we're going to talk about you being the president of McAfee, which was a $7.7 billion exit, followed by running sales at a startup company, App Dynamics, which shockingly enough, you were fired there too. So everyone stay tuned for that, because McAfee, I
was actually executive VP of sales, not president. There was a guy, Mike DeCesar, who was president, but I ended up being the executive VP, and it was a great outcome there.
Well, AppD, great outcome as well.
Yes.
$2.7 billion
3.7,
acquisition.
but who's counting?
$1 billion acquisition.
Yep.
So stay tuned for the part 3 of the Joe Sexton. You can fire you as many times as you want. You are bouncing back.
Get right back up.
All right. Love you, honey.
Same here, baby.